Assalamu alaikum. This presentation is in response to Dr. Ghamdi's suggestions on interest sood, which he has given in his recent series in Islamic Banking or on sood and riba interest, and that he has done through his presentation part 20 to 23 of his series called the 23 Questions and Answers. I would like to say that, to introduce myself, firstly, I am now retired. I have experience of very large multinational organizations over 35 years, and covering both banking, asset management, supply chain, consumer goods, and property businesses. My experiences of finance, banking, supply chain, process engineering, and therefore what I will talk about hopefully would be related to that experience. I'm also fairly knowledgeable in Islamic principles on this topic, and I did my first presentation at the Institute of Chartered Accountants in 2003, and inshallah I hope that I can bring all of that together and respond to Dr. Ghamdi's suggestions. Firstly, I would say that I appreciate Dr. Ghamdi himself had suggested that these are his suggestions and they may need some modifications, and therefore anybody who's got more to add, the experts should actually come out and have a discussion. And I think that is a very, very great approach, because I think that is the only way that we are going to make progress on this. I will be preparing a series of presentations. I've decided that that is probably the best way to answer him and to give the answers to the Muslim community about what Islamic banking is and how we implement it. Coming to overall the comments and the suggestions being made by Mr. Ghamdi is, and I don't want to be rude, I have a lot of respect for our ulama, including Dr. Ghamdi and others that I will discuss later on. But I think it is arising, their thoughts are arising from their experiences, which I think are lacking in this field, and therefore the suggestions they are talking about are actually just not sensible. And what I mean is, discussion comes with the right objective, that is that there is a prohibition on riba, and that the Prophet and Islam has clear mandates that we have to adhere to. So let me just get into where we have agreement with between Ghamdi Sahab and what I'm saying. And firstly, riba is explicitly prohibited in the Quran, and Ghamdi Sahab himself has said this, that riba will. I'm not saying riba is not permitted, is not banned, and that it has been banned, it will be banned till the day of Qiyamah, the day of judgment. And that's, I think, a basic belief that we all have, that whatever is written in the Quran is now there for the best of times. Now we have to try and understand what it says. So I think any difference arising is in trying to understand what the reality of sood interest is. Now I have a detailed presentation in which I go and show that there is no difference in today's definition of interest in the definition of riba as it was known during the Prophet's time and in the Quran, and also going back another 1500 years to the time of the Judaism, Hazrat Musa's time. So if we have that clarity, and you can go through my presentation in which I say that and prove that there is no difference. Now, if there is no difference in the definition, then what we have to see is how do we define it and to not confuse matters, because that's exactly what the Quran has warned us against in Surah Baqarah 275, in which it said that anybody who tries to confuse the two is equated to madness. Now, it's not a word I would have used. It's not a word that I want to really dwell on, but that is what the Quran says, and it's important for us to understand how seriously this matter is considered to be clear by the Quran. Okay, where do I start? First, let me start with the concept of deposit that Ghamdi Saab has suggested, what he is calling principal guaranteed investment. Now, that's exactly the point, that there is no such thing. And that's the mistake that Islamic banking, universal investment accounts take as well. And the Quran and modern finance are all clear that the two are mutually exclusive. You can either have a loan or an investment. You cannot have something that is principal protected investment. Now, let me just try and explain that in a bit more detail. Let's say that you want to promise the principal back to somebody, and let's just say you want to promise another 2% on top of that, and that is the only business that you are going to have. Okay, so you sit there and you say, I want to take your money on a guaranteed basis, and I will give you 2% or 4%. And I think I'm not talking about the 40% that some of these Ponzi schemes talk about. I'm saying you just want to give 4%. Now, if you take somebody's money and promise to give him the principal back, there is only and you then deploy that into genuine investment. As we all know, investments can go up or they can go down, and every investment prospectus actually says that the market value can go up and can go down. And anybody who doesn't understand that, you think gold is a very secure investment. You can look at the price of gold over the last 200 years or even the last 20 years. Oil, soya bean, anything that you will invest in will by definition have its own ups and downs. If you look at the FTSE, the S&P 500, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and you look at the components of them now, they've all changed. And when you say have changed, some go up, some go down. So then the question comes that if you are promising somebody the principal back and you're investing into something that does not give it back, then how do you cover this mismatch? And that's so that's where the regulator comes in. It says you have somebody who's running a business who's promising to give back the principal, so I need to make sure that he will do so. Otherwise, there is the whole exploitation of the person who's providing that investment. Now, what happens there is that is the start of this whole issue of banking. And it is that simple promise to pay back the principal that creates the the concept of a loan, the concept of a liability, and that cannot be wished away. That you have a principal secured investment. You have a principal secured, it becomes a loan. You don't have a principal secured, it becomes an investment. And it's important that we understand that, because the number of people that I have talked to, having heard Dr. Ghamdi say, and I'm talking about professionals that I respect, and what they say is, oh, it's a great idea, we should have a principal protected investment. Now, the principal protected investment is a misnomer. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world, and it is absolutely not possible. Which is why then you come in, you have what's called, if you are a licensed, then the government comes in and says, now you're doing a business that has some elements of trust required in here, and we are going to start issuing licenses to those people that we think are competent to run this job. Now, this is no different from having a license to be a doctor, having a license to run a pub, having a license to drive a car. So whenever you get into a domain where there is some doubt on the capacity of the individual or the organization to deliver, then you need licenses. So in this case, the West calls this banking. Simple as that. The promise to deliver a principal back is called banking. And this was stated very clearly in 2003 at an Islamic Banking conference in Dubai by Michael Foot at the FSA, who was a governor of the FSA. So if that is the definition of a bank that you promise to print, so the moment you say I'm doing a principal guaranteed investment, then by definition that is what becomes a bank. The moment you say, no, I'm not guaranteeing anything, then it becomes a non-bank. Now, so when you are a bank, then the issue is how do you, why do the regulations come in then? Because basically what they want to see is that you are now following a model that allows you to deliver on that. Now, what they've concluded, simply, that it is impossible to deliver on that promise from the business that you are going to do. So if you have a legal entity and all you take is deposits, principal guaranteed deposits, and you say I'm going to be able to deliver on the promise, the conclusion of everybody is that that is an impossibility. So if it is an impossibility, how do banks do it? And what then happens is that the banks are asked to bring in some funds that are not principal guaranteed, and to then keep that as a means of meeting the guarantee. The business, I've just said, is impossible that it will meet that guarantee. So you need something from outside to meet that guarantee. And what is that called? That's called capital, i.e. something which is brought in, which has no liability, and it is the only thing, and it can be used to pay the promises that the company is making. So that is where the whole regime of capital adequacy, Basel I, Basel II, comes in, and well before that, banking capital has always been a requirement. So if you cannot deliver an investment, guaranteed investment return, I asked Ghamdi Saab to think through this. It's what he is suggesting is an impossibility. And the only way you can do that is by bringing somebody else's capital. Now, the Quran, 1400 years ago, has all the wisdom that we can hope for, and the only thing Allah is trying to ask us is to try and understand the Quran in modern science. So I go to Surah Surah Nisa 161, and their taking of interest despite its prohibition and consuming other people's wealth unjustly. So, if you are the beneficiary of uh, of a principal guaranteed investment, then any gain that you get is going to invariably come from the equity holders. And that is where the message that's being given, both in today's modern finance, that it is the equity holders that will provide that capacity to deliver on the promise. The Quran said that 1400 years ago. And I ask all of our financial experts to look at it and to look at this ayat from this point of view. So I hope that answers the question of deposits. Now, why do banks make loans? It's primarily why are banks required to make loans in preference to other investments? So the banking model requires almost not that all the regulations, etc., that you will see require banks to make loans. And again, Michael Foot said very clearly, he said there is no requirement for a banking license to make loans. So why do banks mostly do loans? The answer is that if you have a promise to pay back the principal and let's just say a small amount of return, then prudent risk management, normal risk management is that you must deploy those funds in the same manner so that you have a matching. So you get fixed income back and you give fixed income to the depositor. So you get the principal back from your customer, the borrowing customer, so that you can service the deposit holder. So I would say that this cycle starts from the deposit taker, a depositor, and we as depositors have to bear that primary responsibility. If we are unwilling to move away from that model of banking, then that is something that we will have to answer to Allah on it. Now, coming to what is the key. So hopefully that answers the deposit part, and my presentations in detail will show exactly what I'm saying in terms of this. Then Ghamdi Saab has made suggestions on how the investment side can be done, and he has suggested a lot of that hire purchase is the answer for a lot of these issues. And generally, if they're transaction based, then we shouldn't have a problem. The key issue that, again, in my presentation, I will go through it, that you have to consider is that any investment that leaves a liability, lingering liability, if I can put it simply, after the asset is gone. Now, whether it's consumed, whether it is destroyed or depreciated, whatever reason, once the asset is gone, the question I ask people to consider, is there a lingering liability remaining after that is gone? And if the answer is yes, more or less I would say that the definition will be, the substance will be of a loan. If there is no lingering liability left after an asset is gone, depreciated, disappeared, whatever you want to call it, then I would say it is an investment. Now, if you keep this broad bifurcation in mind, then that will help you understand. So if I pick up any of the products that Ghamdi Saab has suggested, I would say that all of them leave this lingering liability. So if I take, let's say, car lease for an example, which is called a hire purchase that he's suggesting. Now, if you take the car on hire purchase, you've made certain commitments. The reality is that the supplier of that hire purchase financing will not stop asking you for the money if the car has been destroyed. Okay, I mean, people will say there's insurance, etc. But let's just keep one transaction at a time and say what is the issue. And the issue is that there is a lingering liability that goes on for 5 to 7 years, whatever the time of your hire purchase agreement says, despite the car having become worthless. So, an example would be, as it is these days, you're having lots of new legislation come in. I live in London often, and they now have a congestion charge, a low emission zone, and often banning cars in certain streets. So the utility of my car is constantly being threatened. And therefore the value of that car is going down. If I want to go to London, my work is in London, I can no longer use my car, therefore that utility is going down. And if we think that assets have value because of its utility, then I'm effectively devaluing the car that I bought. And similarly, suddenly one day the rules come in which say that diesel cars are no longer desirable in these areas or permitted in these areas. Then I ask the question, my value of the car has gone down because of an action that the government took. Is it insurable? No. Okay. So if it's not insurable, then am I still liable to make all the payments that I'm committed to? And the answer is yes. So anything that leaves a lingering liability once the asset has reduced in value, then that is a debt. Similarly, I can take this on to mortgage, and people who have taken out mortgages will know there is this concept called negative equity, which means the value of a house goes below what you have borrowed on it or done a hire purchase on it. And you don't need to go that far out. Here's a couple of examples of how whole streets of houses in Detroit, in America, and I'm not talking about some war-torn country in the world, but in Detroit, houses were being sold for $100. Now, if somebody had bought that for $100,000, he was still liable to make those payments, or he had to default. So he could not make good on his promise to make the payment. And that again, did he have a lingering liability after the value of the asset had gone? And the answer is yes. And if that's what's happening, then it's a debt. Similarly, Ghamdi Saab suggested credit cards as a process by which you purchase assets from the supermarket. Yes. Or you go to a restaurant and you pay with the bill. Now, I would suggest there's a little difference whether you brought the meat and cooked it at home and ate it, or you went to the restaurant and ate it. The fact is that payment liability is now with you. The asset has been consumed, the meat or the meal has been consumed, and now you have a liability. So it is a loan. So that is the broad definition that I like to use, and I found it to be very, very proper. Couple of other points, and then I'll stop for now because we have more detailed things. We think we're into structured financing today, and we've got all these new concepts which were not applicable or not understood by Islam 1400 years ago. I would be challenging that in my presentations. There are two areas which I have found give me clear guidance that such transactions were available and considered during the time of the Prophet, and therefore the Prophet has banned those transactions, and I would call those structured transactions, if I can use that word. These days, structured transactions are considered to be highly complex and sophisticated transactions, but I would argue that any combination of more than one transaction is a structured transaction. So a sale and leaseback is a structured transaction. A hire purchase is a structured transaction, and so on and so forth. Now, Islamic banking proponents and Dr. Ghamdi appear to be saying that these are two separate transactions when you do a hire purchase. And there it is, Islam is very clear on that as well. It says two transactions cannot be in one, which means if there is, you have to treat it as one transaction. And Western finance, we know that as connected or linked transactions. So structured transactions are something that we need to look at. And all I'm saying is that if it is, if there is a linkage between the first transaction and the second transaction, as there is in what is being suggested by Ghamdi Saab. So if somebody was doing a hire purchase, just the fact that it's called hire purchase tells you it is linked. If it was a separate transaction, there would not be a word such as hire purchase. So I suggest that, and again, my detailed presentations will cover this concept. Do not get fooled by thinking I'm doing two transactions when they are linked transactions. So, in summary, I would say that a lot of Ghamdi Saab has said. I've heard all of it, and my points today are they are not related to any reality of business either at the time of profit or even today. And inshallah, I will go through item by item, and concept by concept, and we will follow through what I've said in a more detailed way, and all with the best intention of Ghamdi Saab, of the Islamic banking practitioners, as it is practiced these days. Let us sit and have a detailed roundtable discussion. I would say I did my presentation in 2003. Islamic banking has been going on for probably 20 years before that, and finance has been going on for 3,000 years. Today's IFRSs, all Basel Accords, all of modern finance is an open book. And we just need to all sit together and take an honest review of these things, and then inshallah we will be in a position to give a very coherent guidance to the Muslims on this topic. And then even more important is a section that I do, which is to show how pervasive is interest in today's environment and what the trends are. My general conclusion is that the trends are away from interest-based transactions. All the modern finance and business has moved away from that and is moving away from it at a very fast pace. We just need to have clarity and encourage that process and buy the halal things, and inshallah we'll be able to contribute, to make our contribution to this field. What I've said also later on is that there are some remaining unfair advantages that are still lingering in the system, and I've identified on 6 of those that I think the Muslim Ummah should work with the West and see if we can either rationalize why those advantages are there or work towards removing those advantages. And my conclusion after all that is that if there is a level playing field, equity will come out as the winner. It will come out as the preferred choice of any investor, and inshallah we will be able to show that as well. Thank you, and stay with us. Inshallah the next few sessions will cover these in a lot more detail.